Hi Dirk. So yeah, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you offering to contribute to the conference. It's great to see you. How are you getting on with the lockdown scenario at the moment?
Yeah, I think so far so good. I think business-wise, we're doing very well as a business. You would probably expect that from a kind of a business that trades in products that are more of the addictive nature. So our consumers probably, if anything, like we're buying more than we were originally expecting. But kind of personally, I think, and that's the same for everyone, is yeah, and there's good days and bad days, basically, like and working from home instead of having the real face-to-face interaction. But it's actually funny to see how quickly kind of this kind of video calling and Zoom meetings and Teams and all that kind of stuff takes off. So yeah, we've adapted to that as a business actually very well. So yeah, so far so good.
Yeah, it's been amazing how well the technology's held up, isn't it?
Yeah. It's actually kind of a particular thing we're starting to look at now, where the kind of the world within Imperial is coming out of this whole kind of COVID crisis, is kind of, well, would we go back to the old normal, or is there actually a new normal that where we can actually kind of still do some of these things that we're doing now and that have been working well in this kind of environment. So with the video meetings and so I would not assume that we go back to a world of lots of travel and kind of face-to-face meetings, apart from some real kind of high level senior kind of FaceTime, so that people get a bit for motivational purposes, but I think for pure operational purposes, like all this kind of meeting kind of setup works actually very well. So we'll
yeah,
I'm sure
I think a lot of clients,
yeah.
I think a lot of our clients are saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing at Turnkey as well. It's sort of been a big sort of social experiment as to how remote working can work and everybody who was a little bit reluctant has been dragged into it and forced to do it and forced to prove the point that it does work. So
yeah, I think even at the moment, like we have even our sales force is kind of working from home and just video calling with customers. And so I've obviously haven't seen that in action, but apparently that seems to be working okay as well. So yeah, I think we have established relationships. That's kind of pretty easy. So yeah.
So for the audience's benefit, could you just sort of briefly describe your role at Imperial and what you do?
Yeah. So basically, I'm the group internal control manager. So my role predominantly is to look after kind of our group control framework, which is basically a very rich set of control requirements, not just financial controls, it's IT controls, it's HR controls, it's health and safety, it's information security, so all of that. For that, basically, obviously, I don't do that all by myself. So I also kind of coordinate our second line of defense. So all the various kind of central functions, predominantly based in Bristol, but some of those in Hamburg, which is kind of our second head office. And really working with them to kind of really get a true understanding of the risks and what the appropriate controls are that we can then throw out to our markets and our factories. So we have about 35 factories across the world. And we have about, well, probably on top of that, another 10 contract manufacturers and about 110 kind of markets. We operate in more markets than that, but 110 kind of markets where we have physical presence. So and that's basically what I do, is just to make sure that all those operating units kind of following the controls, looking after kind of self-assessment processes and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. So what role has the internal controls function had in sort of helping the business through the crisis?
To be honest, a lot of it has been actually business as usual. A lot of the work that I always was doing and the second line as well was always kind of remote. And so sitting in Bristol, not necessarily ivory tower, but sitting in Bristol, kind of communicating basically with our markets and factories. So that fundamentally hasn't changed. I think areas where we are kind of trying to support more is especially in kind of our SAP access management space, where kind of some of our external service providers had to step away for various reasons because they didn't have the bandwidth due to kind of COVID impact, where we just provide a backstop basically to help the business, making sure that access requests keep on flowing through the system and the likes. And I think just in general, just a bit more vigilance in looking out for kind of control kind of weaknesses, and very much kind of helping and supporting markets in where they have questions to say, look, we're all working from home. Are these reconciliations will be difficult for us to do working from home, or how do we deal with controls where normally speaking the evidence is physical, and we would have like some physical files sitting in an office shelf somewhere in an office that we can't get into. So really kind of working through with them in a very pragmatic way to say like do we postpone testing of those controls, or what can you do basically as a mitigation in the meantime, just to make sure that we cover the kind of the most key controls basically, and kind of like giving dispensation for or temporary dispensation for the less key stuff.
So you've had to prioritize effectively to kind of manage through it.
Yeah.
Is that down to resource challenges because of sickness, or resource challenges because of other, all the other distractions around the current scenario?
No, it's mainly the working from home bit. We haven't had actually a lot of resource impact in our business. We had the odd cases, of course, but in generally speaking, actually our staff has not been impacted that much. But yeah, it's mainly the working from home scenario that is actually impacting kind of how do you actually execute controls. That because we might touch upon this later anyway, but we have quite a manual control environment. There's a lot of manual controls. We haven't kind of pushed the boat out, unfortunately, on kind of real true automated controls and an automated control environment. So yeah, in that scenario, obviously we would be impacted more from an internal control operating effectiveness perspective, because it is just inherently more difficult to operate manual controls from a home environment than from the office. Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of businesses are prioritizing cash flow at the moment. I mean, are there any specific areas where you're kind of having to focus your controls efforts, or adapt controls, reinvent controls at all to deal with the current situation?
Actually, the funny thing, no, it's maybe not so funny, but we basically had 2 profit warnings in the past year. The last one was end of January, which actually was just before all of this COVID crisis and pandemic kicked off. So because of that, we were already really into kind of cash conversion, cash management mode. So pretty much kind of all unnecessary travel, any kind of like spend that we would say, look, we can push out till our next financial year, which starts on the 1st of October. So whatever you can push out or not do, like we were already requested to do that. And we actually did that quite successfully already. So by the time that COVID came along, there wasn't actually kind of much more kind of additional cash to save. Like, okay, basically all travel is kind of stopping. And I guess inevitably you're going to save on consultancy spend and stuff like that, because it's also difficult to engage with third parties. So I think in general, you might almost argue from a cash management perspective, like COVID has helped us almost even further to preserve cash. And as I said, like luckily, given the product that we deal in, like the actual consumption and our revenues have actually held up very well. So yeah, like basically profit margin has definitely not suffered. Let's put it that way. But we are kind of and there's several projects actually running that are not run by kind of internal control, but are very internal control related, especially on the procurement side of things, where it's not so much the direct procurement, so the buying of kind of our leaf products or our kind of other things, and the filter tips or the packaging stuff like that. So that's all fine and has always been very well controlled, because it's all based on demand forecasts and stuff like that. But indirect procurement is obviously where you really look at your overheads, especially on the OPEX type spend. Again, CapEx, a very well controlled process, because it requires kind of IBM, our finance shared service provider, to do various setups of assets under construction and stuff like that. So it's very difficult to circumvent controls in that process. But on the indirect procurement side, it is more fluid. Has always been, and that wouldn't be different from any organization of how do you control that. But that's actually where we're really looking now at a kind of cognitive, kind of artificial intelligence, almost kind of like it's kind of a chat bot type setup, which sits on top of our SRM system, where we're working with an external kind of consultancy, Genpact, who's going to provide us with a solution that actually just chats you through the kind of right choices to make when you buy things based on the item category that you want to buy from. So if it's whatever you want to buy, some legal services, then there might be kind of particular control questions that the chatbot will ask, because it might be a risk of bribery and corruption that all of a sudden pops up in that kind of type of buying. So it will ask questions around that, or it might be asking money laundering questions or stuff like that. So not just the basic commercial ones, but again, it will also drive the user then to the right supplier at the right cost. So ideally, kind of that should save us kind of further money, especially on the buy side, basically, of the business.
Okay, and on the so on the you mentioned a lot of your controls are manual. Do you think the kind of automation side of things would have given you a benefit at the moment if you did have more automated controls?
Yeah, absolutely. And we basically this year we have new auditors. So EY are our auditors now. It was PwC before, and then basically they are asking the question, and also kind of in light of other boards asking these type of questions to say, how do you know that your controls are effective? Which arguably is important at any point in time, nothing to do with the current pandemic, but I think now even more so, especially with people working from home, people under pressure, people mentally maybe not kind of like 100% kind of comfortable. So yeah, you don't know what kind of what the impact will be on kind of people's behavior. So how do you kind of really know that our financial controls predominantly then are still effective? And obviously there we are being honest with our audit committee to say, like, look, we can't provide you assurance on it. We can provide you assurance probably more on the access control side of things, but if you would look at more process control, there is actually very limited assurance, except for when internal audit can go and actually kick the tires, which obviously in the current environment is also very difficult for our internal audit function to function properly. So that is actually, I think for us, this is potentially quite an opportune moment to kind of push the boat out a bit further on that, to say, like, look, we know we don't want to spend any kind of unnecessary cash, but and this, I think, should bring it home a bit more, that this is actually not unnecessary spend. This is actually very useful spend, because we could actually probably get a lot more comfort basically over our control environment and our control.
The other thing about some of those things is a lot of companies are looking to save effort, save money at the moment, and automation obviously comes with that sort of side benefit as well, doesn't it? So
yeah, so officially we embarked on it's probably about 6-7 months ago now, which was a bit more on our commercial processes, where we were struggling, or commercial side of the business where we were struggling, because we didn't have kind of really clearly defined processes, end-to-end processes. So yeah, I think the motto of the business is more of looking at a process-driven business. And hopefully that like we get a new CEO who's going to start on the 1st of July. So we really hope that that will continue and then obviously be followed up by kind of technology as well to underpin those processes, to actually give us that control to make sure that people actually stick to those processes.
And I mean, thinking about the other things that are presenting a challenge to some of our other clients at the moment, I think are you seeing any increase in the fraud risk? Do you think the current situation is changing the level of risk that you see there from a fraud perspective?
As such, well, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, of course, given our quite manual control environment, but we haven't seen anything particular kind of an increase in reported frauds or anything. So we actually have tomorrow is our audit committee, so we are quite up to date with our latest kind of fraud reporting. And I mean, there's obviously always the small bit of kind of theft of products, basically, that happens in a business like ours, but nothing kind of major that actually has come through. So that actually hasn't changed. Basically on kind of like where we were expecting an increase, which was actually quite surprising that it didn't. And I actually had to go back to our team kind of several times on this, was kind of more phishing attacks and kind of COVID related kind of hacking attempts. And that has actually been remarkably low. So basically we didn't have any uptick whatsoever in phishing attempts. We always do have them. So and like it's not like there's nothing, but actually we haven't seen an increase, and definitely nothing that it was kind of COVID specifically kind of like as a topic basically, or as a subject that people were using to try and phish us. So that actually has been quite positive and actually a bit surprising, because if you read the general press, it's kind of like, well, cyber criminals have gone a bit mad and let's try to use COVID as a nice excuse to do phishing and get people's kind of details and stuff like that. But so far so good. But obviously, kind of it's the difficult thing again is then people are working from home now, so inevitably there's less supervision. So you can't see if someone is kind of like whatever, sharing a screen or kind of like sitting right next to a window on the street and with their laptop open and people can see everything there, and like obviously you can't check that. So so far so good.
One of the other conference sessions we're running is around the topic of data privacy and sort of how to maintain that within the current environment, because I think there are a lot of challenges when you take all of that information out of the office environment. Obviously some of it inherently you wouldn't have intended that, but you may still need to work with it. So
because I mean for us we had Teams already, but it wasn't really rolled out. Pretty much in the first week of at least the Bristol head office closure, it was rolled out in anger, but inevitably not with a lot of guidance. So there were a couple of kind of webinars and stuff around how to use it, but yeah, and basically if people want to, they can run the Teams basically on their own personal PC at home. But then you get into kind of, okay, if people really start using Teams, kind of, I know the way you guys are, and like where you share files and kind of data basically, and then you bring everything together in a Teams site. Then I think we haven't really considered kind of the impacts of those yet. And kind of how much is that happening.
Securing it properly is a challenge. We've had to put some work into that. So.
So that I think is probably still kind of an area where we have to kind of like get more mature in it, because like as I say, like for us it's kind of pretty new technology, although we had it, we have paid for it, but we weren't using it. So I think even our IT professionals kind of they still need to get to grips with what Teams can do. So it's not just the negative side of it, it's also actually the positive side of it. There's probably kind of a lot more that we can do in terms of collaboration that we're not even doing yet. So
yeah,
that goes back to that kind of first point that I made earlier on in terms of looking at what are the good things that we can take out of this, and kind of how can we improve on those basically, and keep on doing those. So I think Teams will definitely be and if it's not Teams, then has something like that. The collaboration platform is definitely going to be the way forward for us.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay. Well, I appreciate your valuable time. So
No problem.
Thank you very much for taking part in the conference, and yeah, we hope to see you again soon. Hopefully in person at some point.
That would be nice.
Share a real coffee.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes.